Hello and welcome to a new episode of the Digital Innovator Circle. I have pleasure today of hosting Erica Flynn as a guest. She's a Chief Learning and Engagement Officer at the American Society of Colon and Rectal Surgeons, or ASCRS, as I learned it's pronounced as an acronym. Erica has been with ASCRS for more than 4 years, and more recently, and how I met her, she was an executive sponsor for the Digital Innovation Project, which involved consolidating content into a new Netflix-style library. And she shared a little bit more story about that, what worked, what didn't. Hopefully, most things worked. And it's really a pleasure to have you here today, Erica. Hi.
Hi, thank you so much. I'm looking forward to this discussion and I hope it's helpful for those listening.
All right, perfect. So maybe if you can introduce yourself a little bit, ask us what is ASCRS as an association, who does it serve, roughly how many members it have, how many conferences, that'll be good to know.
Awesome. So, as you've mentioned, my name is Erica. I'm the Chief Learning and Engagement Officer with ASCRS. ASCRS strives to be the premier colorectal society. We work to improve patient care through education, professional development, and innovation. Our membership is about 4,000 healthcare professionals, including surgeons, advanced practice providers, and trainees. Most of our education is offered virtually or in person. We do hold one annual scientific meeting a year.
Okay, that's great. Great to know. All right. So I know that you and I would say we met, but we didn't meet. I think I was presenting together with the ASAP, American College of Emergency Physicians, at the CMSS 2024. And you never know who is in the audience. So I learned afterwards that you and I think a couple of your colleagues were there. And so I'm curious, what was the first reaction hearing that story? And what are some of the things that resonated with the situation that you were in?
Well, we did see that presentation. We really liked it. We thought this would be an awesome step forward for our members. Most of our current virtual education is like hour-long webinars. We typically have a good registration. We see about 100 people that sign up for these events, half show up. So most of them do watch them virtually. And when we saw your presentation with ASAP, we thought, wow, this really goes into the current best practices for adult learning, where it gives a chance to break up those long 1 hour sessions into shorter chunks or formats. And we really like the concept that they would be searchable by topic. So if someone has a specific interest, they could just type it and get all these short pieces of content that they were looking for.
Okay, got it. So it seems like it was relevant because I'm asking this is sometimes there are different sizes of the association. Sometimes like a bigger association will say, "Oh, that doesn't work for us." The smaller things that's for bigger. It seems like the overall trend is kind of general because end users are doctors and they're busy and they want things to be searchable and modern. So, and where were you at the time with your systems and everything we just mentioned, like searchability, usability, maybe user feedback, engagement? Like sometimes end users actually email the executive staff or email physician leaders. So I'm curious, like on a scale 1 to 10, how satisfied were you, and what was really the problem you're trying to solve?
Well, the problem we were trying to solve is really chunking up the content. Where we were currently before we created Ustream was these hour-long pieces, and our doctors, if they were looking for something specific within that content, would often have to fast forward or try to find specifically what they were looking for, that 5 minutes of information. And sure, they told us that. We often heard from our members, we want smaller pieces of information and more of them. So those were, between the searchability and the size, those were the two core challenges that we were trying to find solutions for, just to make it more user friendly for them for those things.
And how long has that like been something you would want to solve it? Have you tried to solve it in the past?
We have a second learning portal, which is a digital publishing processing system because our textbook is located on that. And they use, algorithms where if you put in a search term, everything on the portal links to that, but it's more a keyword associated search. So it might not be specific to the procedures or things that our members were looking for. So, I mean, but we've been trying to do this since about 2022 since I came on board.
Yeah, now I now remember it is you're sharing that, and I remember the user experience also, and oftentimes we see that also in the learning management system. It's a little bit like linear, so there are things one after another, and search across the entire portal can be very useful for doctors. It's just that sometimes the way search results are presented, it can be difficult to find, overwhelming. But some of it sometimes it works. But the linear experience versus dynamic experience is something that we also often talk about. And then when it comes to you said since you came, you wanted to do something about it. So what stopped you?
Well, money, time, really, understanding the organization. When I started, we launched this digital publishing platform. So, now that we're several years into that, it really gave me a sense of understanding better as to how we can meet our member needs. Plus, we had all this content from our annual meetings that we weren't using. So, like, after the content on demand was available, minimal people used it. So the content just died. So, how can we keep it going in the long term? So I was really trying to think about ways to, keep it living longer.
Yeah, I'm glad you said it because sometimes it's also what I'm hearing in between the words is prioritization because it takes some time. You were setting the one platform and that took time and you had experiences and learn what works, what doesn't, so that you form like a point of view. So like what would that next layer be?
Ahead.
Right. It also sounds a little bit sad that the content is
I
dying. And then we see that all the time. And you mentioned the conference content. So let's talk a little bit about that. So is the first kind of candidate for the content you would use for a new modern dynamic platform was conference content? And is there a specific reason why conference content? Was there any other content that you were considering?
Well, right now we have just started it with the conference content. We launched about 76 days ago. So, we're sticking with that right now. It does have the last 3 years of conference content. So we're in 25. So it has 23, 24, and 25. I think we will in the future add some additional content, but just to get it, up and running, we thought it was it just utilizing our conference content was an easy starting point.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thanks for that. And conference content, it's interesting because it's fresh, right? Oftentimes it's credible. It's also oftentimes has CME credits for 3 years, which is really powerful. And then, as you said, it somehow dies in a dark corner of internet. Sometimes I joke. So So you heard that presentation. It was already something that's on your mind. You were working on a next level of user experience. And I remember we had a first call, you and your team. And what was the reason why you thought, okay, maybe we should talk to these guys? And what was your kind of first impression when you met us? What kind of clicked? What didn't? It would be great to share experience and also good feedback for us.
Well, it was interesting when we first met, this concept of streaming services like people are used to viewing at their home, you know, YouTube, Netflix, Prime, whatever people are streaming, it has that personalization aspect where, you click on it, you log in, it tells you new recommendations based on what you previously watched. That just really, it stuck with me. I thought that it was a great way to get people to learn if it's what they're used to doing in their home. So it definitely piqued, my interest at that time. And then, after we met with you, we learned more about it, the personalization aspect. That's what members want. They don't want to just be you know, dear ASCRS member. They want to be, dear Erica Flynn, how are you today? They want to feel like they're a welcome part of the society. And I think that, this platform really is appealing because of those components. And, after working with you, helped me kind of build that case to take to our executive leadership, our volunteer leaders to help bring us to that, next level. So, in that case, I think we focused on that how we were going to be bringing back underutilized content. You helped identify a pilot timeframe with the appropriate metrics and milestones that we want to achieve. And then we talked a little bit about financial implications pre and post. So, it was, with your help in creating that case scenario that, you know, our organization made the decision to embark on this to improve our education.
All right, and thanks for sharing that. And in terms of what you expected, I know oftentimes, and we talk when we meet an association about turning content into engagement and revenue. So we also talked about different monetization paths. So is there anything specific that you saw that could work for your association, whether it's subscriptions or bundles or institutional subscription or sponsorship that really clicked? Like, let's start with this, but maybe we'll explore this.
Well, initially, we started with having it basically free to anyone who attended the annual meeting or purchased our on demand. However, I think as we continue into the future, we likely will look at bundling or subscription based. One of those two options is still undetermined. I think we're going to get exploring that further in the coming months. And then probably in another year, explore the corporate aspect of things.
Yeah, yeah, and that it makes sense. And what's interesting, what you just said, like the sequence, right? Because we talk often about five monetization paths, but starting with all five is overwhelming and it doesn't make sense. Especially for the industry sponsorship, because that means that there are already a lot of users and there's a lot of engagement. So like doing it like starting with one or two, getting the initial feedback, getting the learning, getting the survey results, getting the engagement results and monetary results, and then taking from there. So also I found that like also the bigger the organization, the more challenging it is to do too many things at the same time. Like you started with conference content and there'll be other content, and maybe there'll be webinars and podcasts and video libraries. But starting with something that you know it's underutilized, it's kind of, at least I've seen it makes it a little bit easier on making the case. And so how did you make the case with your leadership? Because oftentimes there are a lot of people involved in such decisions.
Well, I just like laid it out like this is our path forward. We don't want to be left behind. Like digital education is changing with all the AI advancements out there. So what can we do to like get on board and how can we use our current content to give our members what they want and move forward at the same time. So this was that was how we made the case. Just get
Did you have to go to the board or to the different committees?
We had to go to the board, so of course I, you know, get some buy-in from key executive leadership in advance of those board meetings. So in this case, I presented it to our executive committee, which is our top leaders, president, president-elect, vice president, secretary, and treasurer. So I presented it to them with feedback. And then after I had their buy-in and their suggestions, it was presented to our full board after that, and then it was
Okay.
approved, so
It's interesting when I talk to digital innovators, and this podcast is called Digital Innovator Circle. Sometimes is this reaction of, yeah, but this is what we should do. It's almost like that it's normal, it's common sense. But then because there are layers and layers of conversations that need to happen, then it sometimes becomes obvious we should innovate. Like it requires like a lot of effort. It sounds like you did have a good support also from your committees and from your board and to make an internal case. And you did it very fast. I think that's also another interesting. I think from the time we met to the time that made a decision, it was a few months,
yes,
not much, maybe 3, 4 months. And we also didn't have a lot of time to deliver because there was a clock that was ticking, which was annual meeting, right?
right.
Can you share a little bit more about how much time it took roughly and how much time it took to basically launch this?
Well, I think the longest part was the contracting phase, so once we had that approval in hand, that was great, and then we kinda got stuck in back and forth contracting, which is totally normal for any, new contract that we're creating. But once that worked, it was, I think, relatively smooth sailing, just us uploading all the content that you guys needed, ensuring the single sign-on was functional. We had a couple back and forths there, but Everything was, I think, smooth. We had some lessons learned as a society. We weren't necessarily capturing all the metadata that we could have been capturing related to the sessions, and that led us to kind of creating our own, like, I'll call it like a table of contents of, topics and metadata, like autonomy of all of our topics. So that was very useful for us in helping group our content the way our members will want it. So,
Yeah, yeah. I remember there was this like subcategorization of content and in a way that is consistent, so that any content that's past content, like last 3 years of conference content, but also all other content that you have and you might add, kind of fits into that classification, and also help the algorithm
right.
find the content. Because sometimes we see a name of the presentation, questions and answers. Like it's very hard for an algorithm
Yeah.
to figure out or search, because if his name's questions and answer now, one thing that we are adding there is search through a transcription, because now all of the videos have automated transcription. So then both search and algorithm can figure out a way, even if something is called questions and answers, or I see panel discussion,
Great.
without like panel discussion on
Right.
XYZ. I'm talking only about titles, not even subcategorization. Okay, so took a few months. I remember the contracting took a little bit longer. That happens. In my experience, about 6 weeks. So I think it takes there. But I do remember that the clock was ticking because we needed to deliver within a week after the conference. I think conference was in May,
Ye
if I remember correctly. And so we had about 60 days. I think it took us about 70 to launch. Normally we do it in 90. So we did it a little bit faster this time. But I know it was launched and it worked. So anything you'd share from your experience on your team on that kind of accelerated launch and the experience of preparing everything like content? You mentioned single sign-on, right? So users have seamless experience. They log into your website and then log in. Anything that either you heard from the team or that you would highlight as positive or negative? I ask people to be honest. Concept.
The only thing that we're still kind of tweaking as we're getting into this is the CME component, because we have this automated process that we do where we upload our learners' CME into the ACCME portal. So that's all automated. So right now we're trying to figure out how to get the CME from Ustream and included in our automated process. So that's the one piece that we're tweaking. It may involve like, more individualized query results where we're already working with your team on some of that. But that's the one thing that I would say think about in advance, because once it launches, you're okay, now we need to do this. How are we going to get it done?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting. CME is an interesting question. And oftentimes we talk about it, the main distinction being earning versus claiming. Because earning can happen based on time watched on a kind of primarily video-based platform like ASCRS Ustream or Netflix style platform for colorectal surgeons in this case. And let's say 1 hour is one CME credit, right? With or without knowledge test questions. But then credit claiming system, as you said, your system is probably through parse, kind of automated with ACCME, so that when a doctor at the end of the year so, enters your system, maybe it's in LMS or other credit claim system, clicks, okay, let me claim the credits. How many credits have you earned? Oh, 5. Watch 5 hours of content on ASCRS Ustream. And then there are questions, and then your system works as is. But it's interesting because once those two are separate and they talk to each other, then the whole process may work. But just, getting those are things that always take some learning on both fronts. Like we were learning that. We're not CME expert. We had the first client. We were learning from them and they're CME expert to see, oh, okay, so that's how it can all work together. Was there anything that surprised you or anything that was easier or harder in that process or that your team told you about?
The whole process was easier than expected. I've gone through a few different rollouts with, these kind of internet portals or like LMS systems, and this is neither. This is kind of a unique portal of its own, digital education portal. This was by far the easiest implementation I've ever been a part of. We had weekly meetings with your team, all the expectations were set, everything was transparent, everything was delivered upon. If there were things that we needed to do, you let us know. So this was smoother than I anticipated.
That's great to hear because we oftentimes say if a client and partner says we uses the word easy, like we know we've done like a decent job with that. And did you have any moments throughout either this 70 days or 2.5 months process, something that was like, oh, okay, didn't expect that, or like seeing something in action, anything that you remember from that time that stayed with you?
So I think, what really clicked for me was when it finally was ready, the SSO was working, I clicked it, I signed on, and it like, after just clicking into a couple things, it told me what else to watch. I just knew that, we made the right decision, this was the right path forward, and our members were going to love this once they got acclimated to it, because it's not something that they're, used to yet. So I feel like, they're going to use it more and more. Our plan next year this year was unique because we had, like, the traditional on demand, which is the full sessions, and then we also had Ustream. So next year, our plan is to not have the traditional on demand, so it would push everyone to Ustream instead. So and I think that that's really when the portal is gonna be appreciated most, when more people get in there.
Yeah, sometimes doctors are just not too used to modern user experience, even though all of them use Netflix, Spotify, Hulu, Amazon, so they're used to in their day-to-day life. When it comes to medical education, they almost have a pause. It's like, okay, now it's gonna be some system is difficult to find. I'll get frustrated, maybe overwhelmed, but I still need to find it. So yeah, hopefully there is no need for a user manual. Sometimes we joke like if there's a need for user manual, we failed with this user interface and then the whole overall user experience. And then you mentioned that you had on-demand products. So how was the difference between how you were doing it in the past? Were you doing offering single year? So you were recording the conferences, but and it had CME credits, but they were sold or offered as a 1 year access, right? But now you this product is consolidated product, right?
Yeah, so it was just a one-year access, and it was available only for 2 months following our annual meeting, and people had to watch the full hour-long sessions. So now that we're able to chunk out the content, it, you know, adds all the time that people all the engagement time that people are viewing it, and they're able to get, their on-demand CME that way, and it's available for with the past 2 years, so now we're adding more content to the mix.
And was the ideal consolidation something you were thinking about already before, or
I was not thinking that we were gonna be bringing prior annual meetings into it. That was just a benefit that we discovered along the way after talking with your team. That was a benefit, and that was something that when I made the pitch to our executive council our board, otherwise known, they really liked that idea, like, to take content that was still eligible for CMA and bring it back into the mix, so
yeah, yeah. And it's interesting because, the sometimes first of all there's CME often available for 3 years. But the other thing is sometimes there's a big clinical study or in a case of surgery, a new procedure or a new technique or a new device that a landmark study or a breakthrough happened 3 years ago and people are still learning it, right? It doesn't mean in some countries they didn't have a device, right? It's they just didn't have it. Maybe they didn't have a robot like Da Vinci or something like that. So now they have it. So something that's 3 years ago is still very relevant. It's new to them, and we sometimes feel on the other side that but that's old. But actually, it's not always like that. Sometimes I also joked that on Netflix, the show Friends had the highest watch rate, I think last year or year before,
I
and
know.
it's 30 years old. I was like, okay, that's interesting. And then, is there anything that I hear often? And I think at the conference where the CMSS conference, there was a lot of talk about attracting younger members. How does it play into in your role? Do you hear about this idea of how do we attract, how do we stay relevant to younger members? And does this project have link to that?
I definitely think this plays more into younger members than our more practicing physicians, I would say. Younger members, they are really trying to balance work life. They're working all the time. Their time is like their most important component that they have. So being able to share this in these 5 to 7 minute increments. We've heard feedback that it really is the perfect time pieces. It's helping them focus on what they need to. And it's just, I think the younger generation is just more used to the streaming component. So it's just ease of access, ease of use, very user friendly. And it's just what they're used to. And I think what they're actually growing or learning to expect now because they're using it with all of their other, technological functionality. So
Yeah. I love what you said. They expect it because it's becoming table stakes. It's not, oh, it will be great in 2, 3 years from now to have a modern user experience and interface. So people expect it nowadays, and younger members especially expect it because they grew up digitally native, as they say, like grew up with screens. Like I see my 2-year-old, like sure he knows what iPad is, what AirPods are.
they know
She
how to
takes them all the
swipe,
time.
and I'm like, how do you know that?
Yeah, yeah, and unknowing like, oh, AirPods, oh, I can watch something, and or expecting every screen to be swipeable, which not every screen is. All right, so it's been about a few months. I think May, June was launched. So I know you have some early results. Is there anything you'd like to share?
Well, our feedback so far has been only positive. We launched back in May. As I mentioned, it's been about 76 days. Our net promoter score is 95. That basically means that when people say, "Will you refer this to a colleague or friend?" most people are giving it like that 9 or 10 score. Some comments that have been associated with that note that the videos are high quality and they're from different content areas to choose. That goes back to that taxonomy that we created for all of our metadata subcategories. Our learners also noted that the functionality is very user friendly and it's helping them find the content and allowing them to focus more with the shorter videos. So, overall, very good content or very good feedback. Our engagement time is about 37 minutes on average per user. So, that's probably watching, I don't know, 3 to 4 videos per time, which I think is excellent. So we have 197 users to date. Of those, I think 70% have actually activated and watched more than one video. And we're hoping that will continue to grow as more and more of our members get access to the platform.
Yeah, that's a great start. And we're talking about busy surgeons. I mean, all doctors in general are busy, but to take time to have 37 minutes per user, it's a lot. And sometimes you look at some other systems for video, they're like, oh, there's like 2 minutes per user per month. So it's an exponential increase, even though it doesn't sound a lot. But on average, when you think, oh, that's the average user spend that much time, I'm like, oh, okay. Net results in hundreds and thousands of hours as there more users come. Yeah, net promoter score is really interesting because one of the ways that it's one of the metrics that's been so well established and it works. So and the more people answer, you're like, oh, okay, this is working. And sometimes we see, again, doctors sending emails directly to the board, even to the CEO, to executive committees, is saying, "Oh, this doesn't work or this works." So glad to hear that it's very positive so far, especially surgery because it's so visual and so important to see how a procedure or technique is done. And then, is there anything like that you would share with other association executives, digital innovators? A lot of people they want to innovate. Sometimes it's not easy. So, what would be your message to them about modernizing digital education based on this experience and in general?
I would just say, build a strong case. Think about, your members, what they need and how, modernizing digital education can offer that. Be prepared to talk financials, be prepared to talk about the future, the intermediary milestones, and then education best practices. Like you really need to show the benefits of this, I think, to move it forward, and then, once you get that buy-in, it'll all speak for itself. So
Yeah, I love what you said about speak for itself because this kind of experiences and digital education products are very demonstrable, to use the term from Shark Tank. Demonstrable and they're visual. It's almost like you don't need explanation. Someone can play around for 2 minutes, like, oh, I get it. That's it. Like, I got it. I know how it works. Yeah. Great. So, is there anything else that I didn't ask you that I should have asked you regarding this experience or in general about modernizing digital education, driving engagement, revenue?
No, I think we hit on all the key topics, and I hope it's useful to whoever is out there listening and, go for it.
All right. I love that. I think that was the spirit that when you also went internally to present. I love to hear that spirit. Okay. Well, thank you so much for sharing the story, and I hope it will be inspiring and for other folks, the association who want to innovate. And we'll stay for one more minute to see whether everything worked technically, hopefully. And then, well, thank you so much for sharing the story today.
Awesome. Thank you for having me.